All right, how's everybody doing tonight? If someone could just give me a shout out in the comments, let me know that you can hear me and I don't have any technical difficulties. That would be great. Welcome to Make Comics Fun Again. I just wanted to do another 80s live stream going over some great 80s comics and great 80s covers because I just want to talk about good comics. No more complaining, except for the fact that I'm very annoyed that they changed the music for the countdown to 30. I don't understand why they did that. Just crushing the old man here. I like the old sounds. Anyways, let's see who's here, and we'll talk some comics after that. Sarge is here, Pedro is here, Jewel is here. How you guys doing? Nice to see everybody here so early. I apologize for being so late. I am a couple minutes late because I was over at John. We're doing comic book team up with Reenie from Fiendish. So we're having a great time talking about basically D&D, well, Pathfinder at the same time. George is here. How you doing, George? Zach Dan is over from John's channel. How you doing, Zach Dan? I wonder if Ryan is going to come over. He was the one who told me I should be doing my own stream. It's supposed to start already. Yeah, he was right. Manny is here. How you doing? Melted Butter. How you doing? Pedro, I think I said hello already, but I'm not entirely sure. Mystic is here. How you doing? I'm alive, or at least I think. Oh, there you go. Answer my question before I even asked it. Let's see. Scrolling down to see who else is here. Sarge is here. Let's see if we've got anybody else coming into the chat. Manny Calliope is here. Good heavens. We got 18 people at the very start of the stream. Yes, there's Ryan. There's Ryan indeed. And let's see what else we got here. Yes, indeed. Melted Butter, you say. 80s music and 80s comics, a great era. Indeed it is. So what I usually do, yeah, Sarge says, I don't think anyone misses the 80s here. No, there you go. that is a very good way to put it. Yeah, no, I don't miss that at all. So what I usually do for these streams is, and you got to give me a second here to get my technical difficulty in order because I have to share the screen and it takes me a minute to put it in correctly. There we go. One second. So go to Mike's. This is, what is it? Mike's Amazing World of Comics, right? And you can search by year and it'll give you the covers by year and month, which every cover came out. I'll make this a little bigger here, although I can zoom in a little bit here. I got questions in the comments already. Oh, yes, I should say. First of all, welcome everybody. If you're new here, I'm just going to talk a little bit about great comics. And if you have any questions for me, put it in the chat and I will get to them all before we end the stream. You can talk about what we're talking about tonight, anything in my other videos about my books. I have links in the description for my 2 graphic novels, and you watched my 3 graphic novels, 2 which are published, 1 is being worked on, and Fade to Blue, which is the new campaign, which will be starting up soon. We have the sign-up page, and the link is there for the sign-up page for Fade to Blue. It will be available digitally, but I had a lot of people saying you can't have it just digital. You have to have a print option as well. So because originally I was going to do just for Fade to Blue, which is basically, I always say, film noir meets Indiana Jones. And that's the trailer that we watched at the first. They were saying, I want a digital copy, but we only have 2 of the 3 floppies done so far. And I can't sell like that. I could sell digitally like that because, you get book 1, you get book 2, book 3 will be out soon. But not if I'm going to be working on the book at the same time. I would like to have at least 3 floppies done. So we're working on that as we speak. So let's see. There was a question here I wanted to answer before I got to the books. Tony says, RJ, did the Legion ever really work without Superboy? I really liked Legionnaires, which is this book here. We'll say, if you want to say work, I don't know. For Keith Giffen's Legion of Superheroes was great in the fact that once it started to go downhill, and I don't mean the quality going downhill, as in the world, he started to destroy the world, which he did. The earth gets destroyed and everybody starts to grow old and get fat, or, their powers go haywire and it just becomes a nightmare. To me, that was a really, really well done story, and I think that it was great. I have almost every one of those issues. But then you got Legionnaires, which Legionnaires was the fact that, if I remember correctly, and I bought Legionnaires from number one, they took that world where the Legion was dying because of all of this mishaps, and then there was an alien race, which I think it was the Dominators. They basically took the entire Legion and they made a copy of them, which basically a genetic copy of every last one of them. And so they were back to being their original form and their original power set and their original memories, according to as if it was the time of Superboy, and that became the new Legion. And you got a couple of different characters being thrown in there after a while, which to me, that worked really well. I liked Legion. I really liked it that way. Again, other than that, I don't know. I do have a lot of Superboy Legion. I bought them from a guy probably about 5 years ago now. He had a comic shop which closed down. And I said, do you have anything? Because he was selling some of them on eBay. And I said, I would really like a longer run. And he said, longer run? I got a whole comic shop worth of stuff which had to close down. You want Legion of Superhero, Superboy? I'll give it to you. So he sent me I think 100. And I have almost all of them now. So yeah, it's a passion. Legion is a passion of mine, but no, it doesn't always work. Anyways, I haven't even gotten to anything. The reason why I put Dream Girl up in the background is because of that great cover where it's Guess Who's Back, right? So we're going back to the 80s. Guess Who's Back. Let's go over some of these beautiful covers before I get to any more questions. So, and I like to point out, because I can click on these and make them bigger. So we have Action Comics. Again, this is 1980. I think this is January, or no, it's 1981. This is February. No, January 1981. Anyways, this is still back pre-crisis time, and you got beautiful DC covers, but they were awful stories in the inside. Now, because look at this Batman cover. I mean, who did it? I think it's Jim Aparo. Most probably, it'll say in the corner. No, let's see. Yeah, Jim Aparo did it. Is Jim Aparo Batman covers are beautiful. I mean, and his internals are beautiful as well. But again, the stories never really matched up to his quality of art, if you ask me, if you go in early 80s. But great Batman covers. I do have this Battlefield Action because this was one of the, if you're talking about books that I have, we basically inherited a comic collection from one of our uncles, if I remember correctly. He was very much a Western and World War II guy, so we got a lot of books like that. I think we have some early John Byrne. Was Mike Severin here? Oh, it's Mike Severin for Captain America in 1981. So we're at issue 256. Yeah. Again, we're getting into the pre-greatness of most of these comics for sales. What I'm talking about. Let's see what else we got here. Unfortunately, I can't see your chat as I'm going through this because I got to concentrate on the second page. We have this beautiful Conan cover because everybody knows I love Conan. I always love the Buscema's and their dedication to Conan. We're talking about Legion of Superheroes. There's a good Legion of Superhero cover. Although, again, no, this is Legion. This is Superboy with the Legion of Superheroes. I think this, if I'm looking at it correctly, if I remember, this is most probably a digest that they're publishing for old stuff for 1981. Let's see. I'll scroll down, see what else we got here. I'm really getting into these creepy books. Quite honestly, their covers are spectacular. I mean, I was looking at Frazetta and a couple of other artists, and their creepy covers. I don't know why these books never took off because they were just spectacular to look at. Again, another great Batman cover. And what else we got? Doctor Strange and so many Legion of Superheroes. What in the world? Oh, this is the Ellison Legion of Superheroes. That's what it is. So 96 pages, full color. I think they were reprints, if I remember correctly. I can't remember. There was the Whitmans, which was the reprints of mostly DC, maybe some Marvel at the time. But I think what they did with the Whitmans was they basically were sold in packs. So they republished them as a Whitman comic, and then you would get it as like a 3-pack or a 5-pack in, I don't know, Kmart or something like that. Anyways, we got John Byrne here with, no, it's not John Byrne, is it? Bill Sienkiewicz is the penciler for Fantastic Four. Look at that. And you never see a lot of these characters too. You never see them anymore. These early 80s characters. Some of them were kind of campy and a bit ridiculous, but at the same time, I think that we'll say unfortunately, but not really, because if they were brought back today, they would just be ruined. But you got some of these good villains that came out in early 80s books that had never had a revival. Never. Let's take a look. Now, look, we're talking about beautiful covers. Look at this. Excuse me. But we got Micronauts here, and I'm not even sure. This is just a magazine. What is this magazine? Future Tense. Right. I can't remember. If for the life of me, it's a British book, if I remember correctly. It's 14p. That says, and we got Molecule Man and the Micronauts at the same time. So I'm not sure what's going on with that. I don't think I've ever read that one. But let's scroll down a little bit more here, and then I'll get back to your comments about some of these beautiful books. And again, early 80s comics is Wild West meets coming into their own as stories and art. Like you're getting, the most rough draft of early artists. Like, well, I suppose early 80s is still a little bit far into John Byrne's career. He was more rough around the edges in the 70s, but you get a lot of artists just coming into their own in the early 80s, with books that they needed to come up on. You got Mike Zeck on Captain America, and you got John Byrne doing Fantastic Four. You have a whole lot. Not even sure. Walter Simonson at the time might have been doing Molecule Man if it was early 80s or late 70s. So, these were not high sales books. So you got to see the early forms of these great artists and storytellers as well. Now, again, as I said before, GI Combat. We had a massive amount of GI Combat, and what was the other one? There was the digest books like GI Combat. They were so big. That's why they were $1, right? They had like 80 pages because my uncle just collected them and read them before us. He never really collected comics treated them as anything special. They just got thrown in a corner. But yeah, we got them all at one point. And you get your Justice League, but Fighting Starro, again, covers are everything in DC at this time. The stories were not ones that were going to inspire. Let's put it that way. And we'll scroll down a little more before I want to get, this Legion of Superheroes, definitely one of the first Legion of Superheroes, which I remember buying off the spinner rack, which was supposed to be the death of Ultra Boy. Yep, the exaggerated death of Ultra Boy, as the cover says. So, but yeah, these, I think, if I remember correctly, these lead up to the Keith Giffen stuff, which is Great Darkness. We'll scroll down a little more. I have more reprints here for Marvel superheroes. This is once again, let me see. Yeah, this is once again English reprints. That's a reprint. I can't remember what the number is for the Avengers. It's like Kovac, if I remember correctly, that destroyed the Avengers, almost killed the entire mansion full of them at one point. Kovac, I can't remember what his name was. Holy Moses, the cover. Look at how many books were coming out. This is one month within 1981. Okay, this is not full swing 1980s where comics were, everywhere. These were still things that were stuck in the corner of your store. These were still things that were dumped on, and you got a massive amount of books coming out. Again, you would never see this many books on the spinner rack, but at the same time, look at the quality and the choice you had back in 1981, when the comic industry was not something that could be taken seriously. And then compare that with today. Sure, you might get more books today, but not the quality of books, and not people who wanted to make their entire career off of these books. We're talking about Superboy just earlier. There you go. This is the New Adventures of Superboy, which after they separated him, I actually have that copy. I had it since 1981. But yeah, after they separated him from the Legion of Superheroes at that time, if I remember, that is after they were separated. Moon Knight, another one that I also, if I don't remember if I bought this off the spinner rack or I bought it at a comic shop sometime later, but Moon Knight was one of those prestigious books, so-called, back in the day. It had a lot more, let's just say, adult-oriented content. Not that there was adult as in the way you might think of it. It's just, it wasn't written for 5-year-olds or 10-year-olds, or it wasn't written for 10-year-olds and 40-year-olds, which some books are. And George Perez, I think you have, George Perez here, the New Teen Titans. Again, what we're on issue 6, I think it is here. Yep, issue 6. Again, man coming into his own, coming off of Justice League of America, where his stuff was fairly rough, and he was still, as he says, learning anatomy and things like that. We'll scroll down, and then you got a whole bunch of Richie Rich books, which were everywhere back in the day, and Rom, which is absolute one of the best books from Marvel of the early 80s, if you ask me. I am always, I never buy collections of things. That is to say, as in a collected printing of a thing. I always go to my local comic shops and I try to find what I have for holes in my collection, just because I like it. And the hunt is something which is fun to me. I know I could go online and just order them, but I don't like doing that. I like to hunt for them. So I go to comic shops here or there, and ROM is one of the things I always look for, because I'm missing only a couple here and there. And they never have reprinted ROM. I think they might have plans to reprint it 2025, but I'm not entirely sure. Great. Again, this is Savage Action, which this is one of the covers that drew me in when I was looking at covers. This is a magazine based book. It was an actual comic, if I remember correctly, and you got Moon Knight and Punisher at the same time. These are black and white books. This is Marvel UK. This is the Marvel UK version of it. Let's see what else we got here. And again, you got, these are the Whitman books. It looks like a gold key, but Whitman is probably republishing it. Space Family Robinson, with beautiful pulpy look for their covers. And then we get down to Sergeant Fury, Sergeant Rock, Conan, all these great, as much as we like to think of Nick Fury as the old, I don't know what you call it, the old soldier that everyone thinks about within comics. No, you want an old soldier, you go to Sergeant Rock. Sergeant Rock. Yeah, again, I think I have that Sergeant Rock as well from back in the day. And then I got to click on the Conan. There's two Conans here, actually. Savage Sword. We have this cover here, plus this Savage Sword cover here as well, which I like this one better. And it also, what is it? Number 39, which has Red Sonja in it as well. Let's see, scroll down a little more. This keeps on going, and it keeps on going, and it keeps on going. I got to get back to some of the comments. Unknown Soldier. You get the X-Men with John Byrne on it as well. You got Thor. Excuse me. With Firelord. Again, this leads up to the beginning of the recreation of Thor by Walter Simonson. Again, great book. I love Firelord. Was all over the place back in the early 80s. John Byrne was using him a lot too with his books. Which, because he was at that time the Herald of Galactus, but he had just been basically replaced by Nova. Anyways, we'll scroll down. You get your Valor books, which are reprints of everything from Devil Dinosaur to Conan the Barbarian, Unknown Soldier, The World's Finest. You got What If Captain America became president of the United States. There you go. Yep. Why don't they make that into one of the mainstream things? Because they always basically take what if stories now and making them into, this is what Marvel is going to do. Anyways, Unknown Soldier, love Unknown Soldier. He's actually the inspiration for one of the characters in one of my books. We call him Major Mystery. Is the origin of where I come up with that character was Unknown Soldier. And This World's Finest, again, had in my collection from 1981. Well, our collection, it was me and my brothers. But again, interesting cover, but the story does not hold up. You also got Warlock, which for DC, once again, you had to be into the stories. Warlock was a very, I think, continuous storyline, and War. These are so many books that I have in my collection. Just let me just back out here. We'll go back to. Hopefully, you can see some of these, and they're not as blurry as you might think on some of these zoom ins that I'm doing for them. Okay, let's see what we can get to the comments here and talk about some great 80s comics, because I got you 20 minutes of me just going on about 1 month of 1980. Oh, it was beautiful. Let's see here. Let's see. We got any questions for me? I usually like to say, and I should have said it the first, just tag me in them or put a question mark so I know what that you want to talk to me and aren't cross-talking to other people in the chat. That would be great. Scrolling down. We have a question. Alpha Red, how you doing? Alpha Red says, what's up, RJ? What's up, chat? We're just talking great 80s comics. Let's see, scrolling down. Zach Dan says, I think the technology for animation improved during the 90s. Yeah, definitely. You'd get things like, I remember watching, I don't know, like Rocket Robin Hood in the 1980s, especially early 1980s, and you would get stupid things happening in the animation where the animator would just suddenly forget to, I don't know, animate the fact that this person had two eyes, and it was ridiculous. Anyways, scrolling down, see if there's any either good comments that pop out to me or questions for me. Mystic says, I miss some of the grit animation had in the 80s and the 90s. One of the things, too, it's not just grit. One of the things, if you look at, what's it called? It's a vampire anime. And what is it called? Everybody probably knows the name. I blank on names whenever they need to come to the forward of my brain. Vampire Hunter D. If you look at that, anime and you look at the cells for that anime, of course, everything black has to be painted black, right? Within a cell that you're doing for animation. But when you paint something black on a cell, it can't be actual black that you see today. If I'm looking at my computer screen right now, I have high contrast on and you have black, and it's just lack of color, right? To some extent. And you even have a lot of these cells now, they have excuse me, they have a black color which is basically light absorbing, and it just looks like a hole, right? But if you look at older animation, even the texture of black is something that I'm trying to go on about. It has a character to its own, and it gives character to it. It's not a lack of something. It is something that is there to give grit and to give texture to your animation. Even that basic little concept was something that we're now missing in animation, Mystic. Let's see, scrolling down. Excuse me for just 1 second. I'll scroll down. I have a frog in my throat. Scrolling down. Robert says, I remember reading my grandfather's war comics. Yeah, same kind of thing with me, except for they were my uncles. Manny says, the Superboy of the Legion comics is supposed to be Clark Kent, right? Well, yes and no. He's Clark Kent from a different Earth, basically. So you have the Superboy and Superman. They were not the same person. So in the timeline, if you're in the timeline of 1981, real world, and you're reading Superboy and then you're reading Superman, they're not the same person. They're the same character, but they're from two different Earths. So that's what's going on with that. Scrolling down. So they even had different power sets to some extent. Even though Superman back then, basically to have any power you wanted, it was just, I don't know, plot device. Scrolling down. Mystic says, pre-reboot, yes, Connor was Superboy in the post-Zero Hour Legion. Yeah. Superboy becomes something different than, if that's what you're saying, yes, Superboy was Clark Kent. It was just two different Clark Kents from two different Earths. I don't know, Earth A and Earth B or something like that. I can't remember which ones they were. George says, you're right. There are so many villains from the 60s through the 90s that they never show anymore. I mean, for the X-Men, it's always Magneto, Sinister, Apocalypse, Sentinels, nothing else. Agreed. There are a lot of good heroes out there. The Reavers are a good set of characters that they kind of did them to death, but at the same time, they're an inspiration for some of the characters for what I'm doing for Thomas Valley #2, because I love the Reavers and their appearance and their connection to the Mojo world through Spiral and through Deathstrike and all that kind of stuff within the X-Men books. Let's see, scrolling down. Pedro says, we disappointed our ancestors with our lack of flying cars. Pedro, funny enough, I turned to someone just last week and I said, I can't believe it's 2025 already. Where's my flying car? Alessandro, how you doing? Glad to see you here. Let's see, scrolling down. Let's see if there's anything else for me here. Scrolling down. Tony says, I had a hard time enjoying post-Crises DC after all the convoluted BS that occurred. It really affected Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes and Hawkman especially. Yes, I hate what it did to Hawkman. Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes, not so much. For me anyways. But yeah, the Hawkman especially of the 90s is just garbage. I bought it because it was supposed to be edgy and it was supposed to be worth something, but yeah, no. The basically Hawkman who is on the Hawk world. Yeah, no. I own so many of those things that I wish I just never bought them. Scrolling down. Mystic says, I wonder if RJ is having technical difficulties. I don't know. Am I having technical difficulties? Let's hope I'm not. Let's hope I've not been talking to myself. I got to scroll down to make sure everybody can hear me. Okay, I'll scroll back up then. See if I can find where I was. Hopefully I'm not having technical difficulties. If I am, put it in the chat. I'll probably get to it in 20 minutes. Let's see. Robert says, yes, 25 cents at the spinner rack. Vaz is here. How you doing, Vaz? Nice to see you. I wonder if John showed up and I didn't even notice he was here because I was in the other page. Anyways, scrolling down. George says, I remember my dad read Ready to Quit comics when it went from 75 cents to $1, and now the comics are $4.99, while soda cans have gone from 50 cents to $1. The inflation math does not add up. I agree. I was right there with him. When books turned from 75 cents to $1, I was about to rage quit as well. I never did, but I felt like it. Let's put it that way. Scrolling down. Robert says, high supply, low demand, high prices. Yeah, that's what you got today. Scrolling down. Let's see. Manny says, I want to read some old X-Men comics. Where would be a good place to start? Old X-Men comics, I basically go to the first, I don't know. I was going to say start at John Byrne and read there because those are the most iconic ones. But there are some books that lead up to John Byrne's run that would also be very good. I wouldn't go as far back as Neil Adams for X-Men. That's too far. It would be, I mean, it's great stuff. You want to read Neil Adams stuff for X-Men. It's great, but it doesn't connect very directly to the stuff like the John Byrne stuff. But the artists who worked on X-Men before John Byrne, the storylines was Chris Claremont. So basically, yeah, start with Chris Claremont's first run. That would be late 70s, I think. But you'd have to find out where Chris Claremont began X-Men, which would be fairly easy with the access to the internet, and start there. That would be your basic, we'll say, primer set of I want to learn about the X-Men. Let's see. Scrolling down. Grand, how you doing? Says, did you do game guides? Your voice sounds familiar. No, people tell me all the time that my voice sounds like something or someone they know, but no, I have never done anything except for my channel. Vampire Under D. Yes. Thank you very much, Hera. I was trying to remember that. Scrolling down. Scrolling down, Ryan says, RJ, are comic book sales hurt by the use of too many dark colors along with too much black ink for textures, shadowing, and backgrounds? To me, contrasting colors, I would say they're castrating the book. So you're entirely right. Contrasting colors have positive energy and sell better. Definitely. I agree 100%. I am doing the colors for basically the first 10 pages of Thomas Valiant #2 right now. And I have a great artist that's working for the colors. He's done almost every coloring for my books, except for the artists that do their own stuff. And he always wants to put in odd colors and some textures in the background and some darkness. And I'm always like, no, go with primary colors. Go with primary. That's superhero. This is a superhero book. Primary colors and superhero books need to go together. And Ryan, I don't know if you have seen my early channel videos talking about colors in comic books. It's the fact that if you're looking at, comics have been, sure, you can have comics for girls. They're romance comics. It doesn't matter. But if you're doing superhero comics, the majority of people reading them are going to be guys. Guys' eyes are literally structured different than women's eyes. We can't see as many colors as women. Therefore, use primary colors so you can make the shapes and movement pop out for guys, because comics sequential art is all about your mind connecting the sequence of events through through the ability to see between the panels and what happens within the panel gutters. And the colors are what makes that pop and makes you pick up in a much faster, much more engrossing way what you're reading in a comic book. So 100%, Ryan, 100% I agree with what you're saying. Scrolling down. Andrew says, how you doing, Andrew? I just got my hands on Chris Claremont Uncanny X-Men Omnibus #1. There you go. It's already out there. I'm doing my part to make comics better by reading better comics. Yeah, definitely. Now, Chris Claremont's early stuff is much different than his later stuff. He becomes very operatic or soap operatic, really, in his later stuff. But yeah, read early Chris Claremont stuff. You want to learn how to tighten up your stories, especially when you see him doing it over the span of his career. Scrolling down. Zach Dan, Mojo World. Yeah, Mojo World is where Mojo lives, basically where Longshot is from, and Shatterstar and all that. They're basically humans, but they're not. They're a construct. They're almost like flesh robots, basically. Mojo, if you don't know, the character of Mojo is this big, basically, he kind of looks like somebody tried to recreate Jabba the Hutt. Anyways, he's a big fat blob of things, and he runs basically a game world where, I can't remember what it's called, the entire planet, and this was before any kind of reality TV, basically. But yeah, he runs an entire planet where it's all reality TV, and you get killed in this reality TV, and he shows it to people, and the humans are the test subjects in Mojo World. So Mojo basically had a servant, it was basically a deformed version of a human, which was Spiral. Spiral then defected from Mojo World, which I think is in a different dimension, and then came to Earth and used some of what she can do, which includes a combination of science and magic to create Lady Deathstrike, because Lady Deathstrike was just a Japanese noblewoman whose, I think, father got killed by Wolverine, and she wanted to revenge herself and her family on Wolverine. So that's the connection between Mojo and Mojo World through Spiral, then from Spiral to Deathstrike, and turning Deathstrike through the Body Shop into what she was in order to combat Wolverine. But the Body Shop also created the Reavers, and the Reavers became one of the greatest 90s, early 90s, late 80s villains that just pounded on the X-Men. That's the entire thing, if I can drag it up from memory. Let's see. George says, wonder why Vampire Hunter D never had a series. All he had were 2 movies. The first movie was not great. honestly. The second one was just spectacular beyond belief. But I think that's why they didn't have a series. I am not for sure. I don't know this. I haven't seen anything that would say why. But the level of animation in that, the just the perfection of the animation was something you could only do on a grand scale. Let's see. Scrolling down, scrolling down. Vaz says, in Legion, they did a good ending for Superboy. Crises on Infinite Earths made it so he shouldn't exist. So they had to story. So they had a storyline about that. Legion of Superheroes number 38. Okay, I don't remember the exact issues or sequence of events for that one. Let's see. Scrolling down. Yes, you can still hear me. Thank God. All right. Let's see. Scrolling down. See if anything else is here for me. Mystic says, did anyone read Firestorm in the 70s and 80s? I did, but I don't know. I could never get into it. I don't know. Did Ditko do a lot of the Firestorm? Because some of the Ditko or Ditko inspired art just didn't ring for me. It looked like Ditko inspired art. I can't remember who the artist was. And he was the usual artist for Firestorm. I don't know. The character seemed interesting to me, but I don't know. It's kind of a ripoff of Captain Atom, because Captain Atom didn't exist until later in the DC universe, but he existed within Carlton Comics, if I remember. And that's what they made Firestorm off of, if I remember correctly. Scrolling down to see. Alessandro says, RJ, what do you think of The Handmaid's Tale? I don't even remember the name of the woman who wrote the entire thing, but she's crazy. She's a off the wall, bat crazy feminist, and she has been since the 70s. That's what I think about The Handmaid's Tale. Let's see, scrolling down. We have Andrew. Andrew says, I'm basically starting by avoiding anything from 2000 onwards. From what I can tell, that's when the rot really set in the big publishers. You're talking about X-Men. That's what you're talking about. Okay. Suspect until proven otherwise. Yeah, no, I would go with that as well. I would say, really, honestly, for my personal taste, I love the John Byrne stuff, and it's expensive as heck if you're going to go buy the originals from the comic store, and that's what I do. And I have been for a long time. They've always been expensive. But to me, Silvestri's X-Men is really the best X-Men out there. It's late 80s, mid to late 80s with Silvestri on the X-Men. To me, that was my core X-Men that really just set the tone for the entire thing. And in order to understand the characters correctly in Silvestri's X-Men, you need to go back to the first of Claremont's run, which again includes John Byrne. Let's see, scrolling down. If you will excuse me, I got to clear my throat one more time. All right, so let's see. Ryan says, RJ, yes, I have followed your channel for years and remember your videos about bold primary colors versus the orange and teal. Yep, that was another thing I used to talk a lot about. Hope to be on your channel to promote comics soon. Oh, glad to hear that. You should promotion. Indie comics is what John and I do for our Wednesday live streams. Tony says, RJ, are you a fan of Howard Chaykin? I really love his take on Blackhawk. Really not a fan. I'm not saying his stuff is bad. I'm just not a fan. It's not something I would gravitate towards and say, I need to get that. Alessandro says, RJ, as I understand, conservatives go from good, better, and best, while progs go from bad to worse. I never thought of it that way, Alessandro. That actually is a really good way of putting it. Let's see. George says, Mojo also gave Psylocke her cybernetic eyes when a Slaymaster ripped out her eyeballs and blinded her, which I think was in a Captain Britain. Was that? Yeah, that was in the Captain Britain magazine, which was Alan Moore and Alan Davis, and it was black and white. So yeah, I remember reading that because they only did it. Well, since then they did a compilation of those books last year or 2 years ago. I don't know. Might have been a couple of years ago, but before that, there was only one compilation. It was probably done in 1986 or so, and they colored it for that as well. Let's see. Scrolling down. Scrolling down. Harris says, is there a good resource for someone who wants to make a comic? Good resource for someone who wants to make a comic. Start with I don't know. You could start with the Marvel's how to draw comics the Marvel way, and there's other ones that branch off of that as well. If you want to go back to 70s style, that's the 70s style. Other resources, I don't know what I can say. There's a lot of people on here talking to me over and over again about different resources that are out there. There are good resources, and it depends on what you want to focus on and what kind of comic you want to focus on, what genre. If you want to do American versus Eastern style for manga, whether or not you want to go 70s, 80s, 90s, or 2000s. So there are plenty of resources out there. I too many for me to even list off, but I always like to go back to the 80s and start with the early 70s resources. I go to How to Draw a Comic the Marvel Way. I go back to Will Eisner and all of his anatomy books and his How to Do Comics and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I would go back to. I like going back to that. Let's see. Scrolling down. Zach10 says, agreed. The animation quality jumped in the second Vampire 100D movie. Yeah, jumped a mile. Scrolling down. Tom is here. How you doing, Tom? He says, there are only 2 Firestorm issues that I really like. The ones where with Moonbeam, coolest Archer of all time, could have been a great recurring superhero. All right. Tony says, RJ, I got to put this up 1 second. RJ, were you a fan of the Golden Age, Captain Marvel, and Plastic Man? I was not. Let me put it that way. I am more and more appreciating those books as I grow older. But at the time when I was a kid and saw books like that, I was like, nah, no, thank you. But yeah, I do appreciate them more today. Alessandro says, RJ, I believe that equity is the virtue of the petty-minded, those who think if I have to suffer, then everyone must suffer. Yeah. Misery loves company, basically. Scrolling down. Let's see if there's any more comments, questions for me. George says, RJ, do you know Mark Silvestri did the first issue of King Conan? I didn't know that until I got some of the dollar bin at dollar bin for number 1, King Conan. Yeah. That's just a shame. That is just a shame. Yes, I do have King Conan. It's not my favorite book, to say the least. I don't think they did King Conan very well with Marvel. They did a very good version, not a very technically accurate version of Conan within Conan the Barbarian, but it was a very good version on its own. The King Conan, not so much. There were good books, and there were spectacular covers for a lot of them, and there were good art for a lot of them. Again, you got Silvestri, you got Simonson in some of them. You even got Mike Gustovich doing some of them, but yeah, not the best character arc, and it didn't last very long in terms of Conan books for Marvel. Let's see. Pedro says, RJ, do you think it's hypocritical? What do I think? RJ, do you think is hypocritical judge sex appeal but not violence in stories? Every time I ask this, no one gives a clear answer. I'm not entirely sure, Pedro, what your question is, but I'll try to answer it. Here's the thing. You can have sex appeal through beauty. So it's not something that has to be absolutely adult to it. But the same can be said for violence as well. I mean, I think that, and I said this a number of times on my channel, I think that the Iliad and the Odyssey are books that should be read to children. But they are hyper violent. I mean, they describe the deaths of people in extreme ways. So you have to have a certain kind of child that would want to listen to such things. But again, I think both of them can be done in a way that's respectful. And actually, it can be for all ages, all that kind of stuff. At the same time, let me put it this way. I only put sex appeal in there if it actually moves the story along and is connected to beauty. That's what I do. If you're putting it in there as something that people are going to linger on and their thoughts are going to go in other directions, then you're actually taking them out of the book. You're actually taking them out of immersion into the book. And I think you're doing a disservice to yourself. As for the violence, I just like to do things, again, so that you can have the biggest audience possible, which means to say that young men, young women can read the books, and so can older ones, and they can both get the same amount of enjoyment out of them. One of those things that I do for Crom the Destroyer is I do the old Marvel Conan the Barbarian thing, which is you don't really get, well, you certainly don't get anything like entrails, but you don't even get blood most of the time. And if you do get a spatter of blood, it's usually in black rather than red. It's just simple things that you can do to make it much more appealing. Let's see. Scrolling down. Alessandro says, RJ, I really liked the Creature Commandos comics. You can imagine how disappointed I was when James Gunn's animated adaptation. Yeah, Creature Commandos was DC. And I think it came out of their weird books. They had basically a whole line of them. Interesting stuff. I didn't have very many of them in my collection because I don't think my uncle liked them too much, but we did have some. My chat just jumped on me, so I'm going to have to scroll up for 1 second. Let's see if I can find out where it was. Here we go. Vaz says, Claremont, going back to the X-Men, how did he decide to address current day X-Men? Easy. He made his story take place in the 90s after the Kitty Pryde and Wolverine series. Yep. Tony says, RJ, do you think that Hollywood could ever make a truly faithful Robert E. Howard adaptation? I don't know. I think that, let me put it this way. The Arnold Schwarzenegger Conan the Barbarian first movie was a faithful adaptation of the feel of Conan, not the story. It definitely was in an opposite direction to Robert E. Howard's way of looking at the story. But to me, it was a faithful adaptation of the feel of what Robert E. Howard was going for, because it just oozed low fantasy in simple things like poor production quality, if you want to put it that way. And I don't think that Hollywood will ever go back to poor production quality. It had almost a B movie feel to it, but one step up, so that it could run with the big boys, but at the same time look like a grainy film that you could see the film quality being something as a B movie. And that is a feel for Robert E. Howard, if you ask me. Just look at the kind of books he published in. It was off the beaten track, to say the least. And that's the kind of feel that needs to be done with a Conan. Now, whether they could do the story correctly, certainly not today. Whether they could do it in the future, possibly. Whether they could nail down the look and the feel, I don't think they could ever do that again. Scrolling down. Let's see, scrolling down. Mystic says, did I read the pre-crisis Shadow War of Hawkman? It was a good read. No, I don't think I did. It's not ringing any bells. Anyways, Ryan also has a question. Says, RJ, how important is spacing between multiple heroes and action scenes in comics and posters? In my comic, we shrank the heroes to allow for open spacing and the feel of movement. I don't know the answer to that question. How important is spacing multiple heroes and action scenes? I'll just say this. For me, and the way that I put it, I have a lot of characters, especially in Thomas Valiant. I tried to space them out as much as possible and have Renzo do that so that they each had their own space. To overlap characters is not something that I would technically want to do over and over again, unless they were meant to do it in a tactical way, which has something to do with the story. That being said, people criticize some of my splash pages from Thomas Valiant #1, saying that I spaced them out so much in different ways, in that some were closer than others, and they were, I don't know whether they were new comic readers or not, but they were saying, why is this person tiny as compared to that person? So anyway, it was just perspective. It's like, do you not know how perspective works? I don't know. Maybe you don't, because you're not used to sequential art. in the old style anyways. But yeah, I think it is important. If you want to go, the thing is that in the 90s comics, they didn't do that, especially the image inspired comics, because it was all about the artists and not the characters. And that's why they could just overlap characters. That's my thought on the whole thing. All right, scrolling down. Let's see. Zach says some violence can veer into hate fantasy, but not unusual. Yeah. Again, no, I don't like what they call horror porn or basically vengeance porn. No, that's not something that I would ever want to spend my time on. Logic is here. How you doing, Logic? Logic says, RJ, do you think Gen X comic fans outright refuse to accept that Marvel and DC are finished, or are they lying to themselves on purpose because they have to accept it? But cognitive dissonance rules. I always thought you're talking about Gen X as a comic at first, but no, you're talking about actual Gen X. I don't know. I wouldn't think that myself. If I was not connected to some of these people on YouTube, I would say, no, I think Gen X is doing fine and they'll be able to let it go and let it die. But then I watch videos like Richard over at Comics Matter, and yeah, he's Gen X that just can't let go. He can't. I'm sorry, he should be able to see that it's dead, but he can't let go. So you might be right, Logic. There is at the very least a section of Gen X that just won't let it go, and they just can't accept it. They can't move on. I think it's time to move on. Scrolling down. Even though I'm talking about great 80s comics, I'm talking about the history of comics. I'm saying go back and read those comics, but I'm saying that there is a time for Marvel to be replaced, and I think that time has passed. Scrolling down, Faz says, still sad that someone needs to go to the 90s to do a story because you can't retcon the current day X-Men. Yeah, indeed. A lot of sad things with current comics. Logic also says James Gunn has made the exact same film his entire career. Weird, quirky, niche pastiche with slapstick humor and silly sight gags for a small audience. Guardians #1 was lightning in a bottle. Okay. Yeah, sometimes it just gets hackneyed, even if it's the same person doing it over and over again. George says, do the X-Men ever have villains anymore? I mean, Mr. Sinister, Magneto, White Queen, Black King, Sabretooth, even Apocalypse is an X-Men now. Yeah, well, they were on Krakoa. Whether or not after that, I don't know. But again, yeah, the last X-Men's that I did read, which was the Krakoa line stuff that I bought and read anyways. Yeah, every villain was now an X-Men anyway, so didn't really matter. I agree they don't have villains anymore. They just have ideas in a mask that they fight against, as I used to say. Tony says, RJ, who would you consider to be an overrated comic writer and comic artist? Overrated comic writer. Ugh. Overrated comic writer. Mark Waid certainly is an overrated comic writer. I think we all were able to see that in the last, 10 years. But I thought he was an overrated comic writer for a long, long time. How about a comic artist? Overrated? Whew, I don't know. My taste in art is very different from most other people's. But I think that you could lump a large portion of people who are technically sufficient as illustrators today, but who are trying to pass themselves off as sequential artists, and they're just not. They're technically brilliant. A lot of people that are working in comics today, they have some spectacular skills, let's put it that way, but they're just overrated because they don't know how to do sequential art. So I couldn't really say somebody off the top of my head to name a name right now, but someone who is an illustrator but not a sequential artist, who thinks they're a sequential artist, that would be an overrated comic artist to me. Scrolling down. Let's see. Scrolling down. Jules says, I only saw the beginning of the Arnold Conan movie. He gets taken to a room where a lady is naked. So I stopped watching. Yeah. That's Robert E. Howard for you again. Um, that's the Conan books. That's why if you want to go back to something that's more of a sanitized but still good version of Conan, you just go back to the Conan the Barbarian comics, not the magazines. Let's see. Jewel has a good list here. Overrated writers: Neil Gaiman, Alan Moore. Completely agree. Scrolling down. Oh, look, John has just popped up. How you doing, John?
Hey, Rini and I kept talking like two idiots, so I just saw you list as well.
I was just going through comic covers, and I thought you might want to come by,
wow.
so that's why I dropped it in. But I'm just trying to get to the end of my chat here now to see if anybody else. We're talking about overrated comic writers and artists. What are your thoughts?
Brian Michael Bendis. There you go. Logic Brian is absolutely right. He's patient zero for everything that's wrong with Marvel Comics.
I would say that Mark Waid was probably my take on the patient zero, but yeah. Logic also says Tom King, of course. Yeah, that would add to the pile. Let's see.
Yeah, do people like him though? Like Mark Waid. Mark Waid has some good stories.
Yeah.
Brian Michael Bendis has okay story. Like I like Powers, his original stuff, which makes me even madder at him because he can write a good, compelling story. But I'm going to save that for my stuff, and I'm just going to do whatever weird stuff I want to do to the Marvel and DC stuff, you know?
Let's see. I think I'm getting near to the end of the chat here. Let's see. We can get back to the comic covers if we go to the end of the chat. Yep, got to the end of the chat. I think I got everybody's comments in here. So we're going to talk covers just for a little bit. Well, actually, I'm talking great comics. I went back to Mike's Amazing World, and we were going through January 1981. Let's bump it up to February and just go through this a little bit. I'm saying to myself and to the people in the chat, I would say this is when comics were just coming into their own, but still hadn't got to a point where they were something that people were truly excited about it. It was really, really niche still in 1981. And you still got a wide variety of comics coming out from a wide variety of publishers, so much so that there was something for everyone.
Wow. It's seeing these. I remember that Avengers cover, that Captain America cover. Yeah, I wasn't into DC yet at this point, so a lot of these DC covers are. Yeah, I remember that. The Shadow Lord.
Which was the other one? There's a Captain America here. It's not a very good version of the cover. I think
that's the British version.
Yeah. We have my brother was buying those Captain Americas back then, so yeah, he had those ones.
The one with the Hulk is the one I remember.
Who did that? Let me see. It's Alan Milgrom. Okay. Yeah, I think he was a Hulk artist over on Incredible Hulk at the same time. So he did some he did some interesting stuff, I think, around the time where you got Wolverine emerged out of the Hulk comics, if I remember correctly. Let's see. What else we got here?
Oh, I remember that Daredevil.
Yeah, I was just about to say that's what drew my eye. The Daredevil. Again, my brother was collecting these at the time they were coming out on the spinner rack. You got Frank Miller, Klaus Janson.
Yep.
Team Supreme at the time for Daredevil. Let's see. One of the unfortunate things, I said this on one of my videos before, but Klaus Janson still works as a consultant for Marvel, trying to fix things from the inside, but I don't think he's ever going to have the impact that he wants.
Go on that Fantastic Four. Oh my God. This is such a bizarre period of the Fantastic Four.
That's what I was saying. I was saying to people just before you got here that the Fantastic Four has some really good villains that from the early 80s that you never see ever again.
I was fascinated by this. This was that dark being that it was a 2-issue story.
Yep.
And he was like bleeding this black energy and he was getting smaller and smaller, but the black energy was destroying everything. I just remember as a kid, I was like fascinated by it. He was that negative being, and then there was like that positive woman, and I forget all the details, but it was really weird because it was in between John Byrne runs. People forget that John Byrne had that run where he was the artist.
Right.
that
This
had
is
that
Bill
great.
Sienkiewicz here.
Yeah, and then he left, and then he came back as the writer and the artist. You know, it was almost like, it was like a run of fill-in artists and writers. It was a really weird period for Fantastic Four. Kind of charming in a way.
It was right after, they did the basically the birth of Franklin Richards and the whole Harkness introduction into him being a toddler. That's when they started to get into this section of Fantastic Four where you had multiple people coming on the title doing stories and art.
Yeah, like one issue was Bill Sienkiewicz, the next issue was Al Milgrom. There was like no continuity.
Did you ever? I bought these things, like these Soul Air, Man of the Atoms, these old Whitman stuff.
No, I
I
never
was
got them.
I was saying to people earlier here, the Whitman stuff for me, anyways, we used to buy it. So basically, they would be reprints of mostly DC, I think, but you would get them as 3 or 4 packs in like Kmart.
Oh yeah, yeah. Play World, there would be like a good comic on the front and a good comic in the back, and then a piece of crap in the middle.
Yep.
Like they just cleared out their inventory. Look at that Ghost Rider. Wow. I haven't seen that in forever.
This is back in the time where Ghost Rider literally fought the devil.
Yeah. Yeah. Look at that. He makes his motorcycle out of fire at this point. And then of course Knight Rider. I guess they couldn't call him. Yeah, I forgot. They changed his name from Ghost Rider to Knight Rider, the original Ghost Rider.
Yeah, Ghost Rider back in the day was like 70s weird.
Yeah. It was a bizarre comic.
I was telling the chat that we inherited a lot of books from my uncle. So he had a lot of war books, a lot of Western books, and stuff like this with ghost stories.
Yeah, I never got these Whitman books and the Dell. I was a Marvel kid. At this point, I was full on Marvel. If I had DC comics, it was because somebody gave it to me.
The funny thing was that someone had told me this story. I can't remember who it was off the top of my head, but I think it was the guy who ran the comic shop where I was a while ago. But he's on the East Coast, right? And he was saying, I had started a conversation with him, and I said, "Why do I always see the same books over and over again in the comic shops that I go to?" And he said, "Well, it's easy." Excuse me. He said, "We're on the East Coast," and excuse me for 1 second. He said there used to be a traveling salesman, and he would go up and down the East Coast, and he would buy people's leftover comics that they were supposed to send back, and then he would resell them in a different state, in a different place on the East Coast, and that's why you would get a repetition of these books over and over again. And that's the thing. That's why I got into a lot of these other, besides Marvel and DC books, is because you would get, like a hardware store, you'd find the most bizarre things in the world because this traveling salesman came through and he dropped off all these books. It's like, yeah, here, take them, because he got them basically for free, right?
I would love to find that person and hear their story. If that what are the odds that person's still alive?
Probably not a lot.
Probably more than one person too.
This is the era when I really got into Iron Man, and it became one of the books that I like, up until through the end of the Armor Wars. Even after that, for another 2-3 years, I bought it from here forward.
Tony Grigo, what's the earliest comic? For me, it was and I know I'm going to say the number wrong. I think it was Fantastic Four 186. That was the first comic I bought with my own money, but I had other comics. The first comic I remember reading, I finally tracked it down. It was a Flash comic. I'll get it. It's in the stack of comics someplace. Oh wow, look at that Man Thing.
There's a good you want to talk about 70s weird, go back to the Khazar stuff, where you got flying, what is it?
Pterodactyl men.
Yeah, no, but they would saddle up and fly on sharks. They had flying sharks. It was like, all right.
That was a good run, that Khazar run.
We were also talking about Legion of Superheroes and how it went downhill after basically the Superboy left it. Until Keith Giffen came along, if you ask me.
Yeah, there was, ebb and flows. What was my 70s, 80s weird? You know what the weirdest comic was? Defenders was such a bizarre comic.
It was. It didn't fit into anything.
It didn't fit into anything, and like they gave it to Steve Englehart, and I think they weren't paying attention because that guy is like you know, old fashioned typewriters when you type every once in a while you have to hit it back. I think they just forgot to hit him back every once in a while. Remember that whole like elf with a gun storyline that they never finished? You know, I reckon, guys, if you can just get like a 20 consecutive issues of Defenders, it's you don't need to take drugs. Just read that book. It's insane.
To me, it was none of these characters were acting in character for Defenders either.
Right. The Hulk. The Hulk was like babyish and stupid. Doctor Strange was like their babysitter. Like he was really weak. And I guess when you put a heavy hitter like him on a team, you have to weaken him, you know? Oh my God, look at that thing in the Avengers. That Marvel 2-in-1 right there. Second row, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth comic.
Oh my God, I remember that. Yes. I was just looking through this last week.
Marvel 2-in-1 is such an underrated series.
Yep. Like honestly, back in the day, it was a second-rate series,
right?
But today, this would be top tier,
right? It was a goofy second-rate series. Same with Marvel Team Up, but I on Sunday Comics I did like a 3-week, 4-week run of Marvel Team Up story, and people like this is so good, yeah, and it was considered, you know, that was like a tryout, that book, you know, Marvel 2-in-1 and Marvel Team Up, you know. Chris Claremont did that first before he stepped up into the X-Men. You know, that's what they tried him out on. It's so good.
You got Negative Zone storyline for that Marvel 2-in-1. Most Marvel 2-in-1, if anybody is not familiar with them, were one-shots.
Right. And it was convoluted. How did the thing all of a sudden meet Jack of Hearts this month? You know, it was once you got past that, it was kind of fun.
Were you into Master of Kung Fu?
Oh yeah, those
back
were
in the day.
Yeah, guy, I cannot stress how cool Kung Fu was back in the 70s and 80s.
Oh yeah, when you had you were just coming off of Bruce Lee movies,
right?
And, you know, they played them on TV all the time.
You know, dune buggies, mini bikes, and Kung Fu. That's the 70s, guys.
I think I said this last week on one of my streams, but nobody remembers the fact that Spider-Man used to have a dune buggy that could drive on walls.
Yep. Yeah, and Master of Kung Fu, for whatever reason, was tough to find in my neighborhood. So it was a big deal when we actually tracked down an issue. I think I had like 30 issues, but never in order, you know, because you just couldn't find them.
I remember when they did, what is it? Marvel Premiere? I can't remember what it is. When they did the origin of Wolverine in that book, right? But they also had Master of Kung Fu and Man-Thing in it at the same time. And it's like, finally, they were reusing Master of Kung Fu after all these years. I remember just being, I don't know, surprised.
Plus, the Defenders proves Iceman was never secretly gay. Yes, to the story that there was a short-lived Defender named Cloud. And Cloud was basically a naked girl who had like a ring of clouds around her boobs and a ring of cloud around her nether region. I'll keep it G-rated for RJ's sake. And she could turn into a cloud. That was her power. And then she would coalesce back into human. But if she was female, she turned into a cloud. Then when she coalesced, she would become a male. And if she was a male, she'd turn into a cloud and coalesce and turn into a female. So she was alternately the other sex. And Bobby was hot for her. I mean, she's a hot naked chick running around. She turns into a cloud, turns back into a guy, and he's just like, I don't like you anymore. So if he was always bi, that would have been the perfect partner for him. You know what I mean? But
and again, this is
there you go. There's your Thor run.
Yep, this is where my brother started collecting, and then when I started right in the Walter Simonson era.
That Walter Simonson's one of the best comic book runs of all time.
Definitely. But these things, like the older stuff that was right before
What is that X-Men with Doctor Doom?
Oh yeah, you get John Byrne here.
No, this
No,
is
it's not John Byrne, isn't it?
Dave Cockrum. This is like
Yes, we were
right
just
when
talking about this.
yeah.
Someone was asking, where do I go to if I want to start a good X-Men run? And I said, start with Chris Claremont's run, which would include the Cockrum stuff.
Yeah, so this is this. Well, Dave Cockrum was the X-Men artist before John Byrne. Then John Byrne left, and they brought Dave Cockrum back for a couple of issues. So this is after John Byrne. This is Dave Cockrum's second run, in the second issue of his second run, and this is that issue where Wolverine strikes a match on Doctor Doom's armor, and then later on in the John Byrne Fantastic Four, Doctor Doom's inspecting all his robots, and he says, Robot 4452, why do you have a scratch? He goes, oh, that's where the mutant Wolverine struck him. He goes, and how did you slay him for this affront to the personage of Doom? And the robot blows up. Yeah. A lot of these, I even have that Green Lantern. Yeah, I guess I started getting into DC rather around this time. Yeah, I got that Warlord. I collected. Yeah, Warlord was a good series.
Yeah. I have a lot of Warlord as well, but it's a dense book to get through, I think.
Yeah, back then comics were so word heavy.
You gotta love when you have a guy with a sword on a horse that looks like a unicorn and a Tyrannosaurus Rex in the background.
Yeah, fantasy with dinosaurs. What's not to love?
He also has
in the middle of the earth,
He also has a gun in his belt, just in case anybody doesn't know that.
He carries like a Luger or something like that. Yeah, Mike Grell is like a man's man kind of guy. Like, do you ever read John Sable? John Sable would horrify kids.
Yes, I completely forgot about that book.
John Sable was a children's book author by day, and then at night he was like a mercenary, and he would go hunting. And he was also I think an Israeli citizen, and he was like going out and like hunting Palestinians in one issue. Yeah, it would just cause kids' heads to explode. Oh, look at that Man Thing. Look, and this is just one generic month in 1981. Look at all these great comics.
It was funny. I was on X there the other day, and somebody had posted like a Man Thing short or something like that, right? Where he basically, I don't know, it was like an old lady come up to him and grabbed a hold of him. So somebody was in this big Man Thing costume, and I was going, "Hey, wait a minute, she should be bursting into flame."
She didn't fear him. She didn't fear him.
Exactly. That was my second thought. I went, "Wait a minute. Well, maybe she's not afraid."
Oh, is that Michael Golden on that Spider-Man? No, is it? That's Peter Parker's Spectacular Spider-Man.
I didn't even notice that was there. That's Walter Simonson.
It's Walt Simon. I just need to point out that there's a cape on my pajamas. Everybody, I got my Superman pajamas on with my cape, and whenever I put this on, I run around the house and make noises. Just felt I should tell your audience that.
Frank Miller, penciler, inker is Walter Simonson. Wow.
That's so good. Is it any wonder like RJ and I are the way we are? Look this is the comics that came out during our formative years, And any given month, comics was so good.
And again, Peter Parker's Spectacular Spider-Man was a throwaway book compared to the other Spider-Man titles.
Right. It was the second tier. I got into Peter Parker because I got in on issue 1. Like, I was discouraged. I was like, I'll never get all the issues of Amazing Spider-Man. And I really should have, because back in 1981, you could pick up an Amazing Fantasies for like less than $100, which is still a lot, but it's nowhere near the way it is today. Look at that beautiful George Perez. You could tell by all the machinery in the background.
Yep. And as I was saying before you got here too, it's only issue 7, but George Perez had just come off of Justice League of America, where he was struggling to actually do that book because he was so new at the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm reading his Deadly Hands of Kung Fu now, and it's him doing the Sons of the Tiger, which is some of his earliest Marvel work. And it's so primitive, just compared to that Teen Titans. You can see how. Oh, look at that Micronauts! I got like everywhere you look on every line. There's a great comic. There you go. Look at that. Artist Pat Broderick. Yeah, he did the alternate cover of my comic. The same guy. The guy who drew that drew my cover. Guest appearance by the Hulk's Doc Samson, fighting Nightmare. So this is a Croyer fighting Nightmare from Doctor Strange. Guest star Doc Samson. It's just, and the kitchen sink, it should also say. RJ and John, how about the Impossible Man versus the Fantastic Four in the set? Yeah, that's the very first. The Impossible Man fought the Fantastic Four in the very first comic book I ever bought with my own money. Fantastic Four 186, I think it is, where they fight Claw, and then Reed Richards becomes the Molecule Man in a cliffhanger.
Oh yes, oh yeah. I think that was one of the first Fantastic Four that we had as well. Because I went back and whenever I went to a comic shop, I always buy Fantastic Four, right? As early as I could. I go back to I like even in the 80s, I was buying as early as the first appearance of him and stuff like that, which is now Warlock, right?
Yeah.
But what the one you're describing with the Molecule Man, I honestly think that was the first Fantastic Four I ever read.
Yeah.
And it was the second part, and I was like, how does this work? I don't understand.
Yeah, and it was Len Wein writing it, George Perez drawing it, and Joe Sinnott inking it. It's like, how can you not? It's just like everybody was a legend on that comic, and it was like in the middle of a 4-part story. Like Reed Richards already he lost his powers. Agatha Harkins is walking around like, who are these people? But I didn't care. It was so cool that even though I didn't know about 50% of what was going on, I was still super interested.
Yeah, the fact that, and they were so, again, bizarre, but at the same time, compelling stories. With the whole Molecule Man, what did he do? He took the wand that he had and he turned an entire high rise into a giant golem while people were still inside it.
Yeah, and I remember there's like women hanging out the window, it was so good. But I got to go to bed now, RJ. I'm back at work. I wake up at 4:30, but I didn't want to not accept your invitation,
No problem. Thanks for stopping by, John. We're going to just wrap this up.
See you, everybody.
Coming over.
Bye-bye. Oh, I was just going to walk away. I got to turn off my camera.
All right. I'm going to go back and see if there's any more comments for me before we leave, just because I can't see the comments when I'm going over the books on another page. So let's see. Scrolling up and then scrolling down. Let's see if there's anything for me. Yeah, you're right, Michael. I'll never get to the end of the chat. That's okay. I have some time tonight. Alessandro says, RJ, I thought about your phrase, some ideas are meant to die. And I remember how many progressive comics portrayed ideas as if they were an internal and unstoppable force. Yeah. That's the I would say utopian mindset that they have. That's where that comes from. Just their good ideas supposedly will never die. Sometimes good ideas die because they get replaced by better ones. Let's see, scrolling down. Let's see if there's anything for me. Oh, Logic, I want to read this. Unpopular opinion, John Romita Jr. is very overrated. John Romita Sr. is an absolute legend. I don't know. I grew up on John Romita Jr. and reading old John Romita Sr. at the same time. So I appreciated both of them. I think that the new John Romita Jr. stuff is just garbage. I'm sorry to say. And it started in the late 90s when he simplified his style. And it just doesn't work after that. But his stuff for the X-Men, I thought was beautiful. And the other books that he was working on around that time. Scrolling down. I'll see if I can get through this with speed. So I'll just go through the things that are attached to me. Tony says, RJ, what's the earliest comic book you can remember owning? I honestly, Tony, again, I had an uncle which gave us books. I had two older brothers which collected comics before me, so I cannot remember a time as a child where there were not comic books around me. I just can't. So like there were comic books around me from the time I was probably an infant. I cannot remember the earliest comic book that I owned. I do not know. There's no chance of me remembering that. And especially when you live with two older brothers and comic books were basically bought by our parents. They would just buy us stuff and, throw it back to us while we're sitting in the car. Because again, living in a time where we don't care about seatbelts, or even if there were seatbelts in a car, we're climbing all over the place and up into the front seat and to the back seat and up into the back window and everything else. They just wanted to keep us quiet and make sure that we didn't jump out the door. And I do mean that in a literal sense. Scrolling down to Logic. Logic says, RJ, as a fellow Gen Xer, did you ever have actual Archie comics? I didn't actually buy Archie comics. Quite literally, I bought one as an idea that it might be worth something in the late 80s. That was the first time I actually bought an Archie comic, but Archie comics were everywhere all the time. Again, they were bought for kids. I don't remember kids actually buying Archie comics for themselves. Let's see. Vaz says, RJ, what is my 70s and 80s weird that you really liked? 70s and 80s weird that I really liked. Phew. I don't even know off the top of my head. 70s and 80s weird that I really liked. There was 90s weird and there was 70s weird that I can tell you I absolutely hate it. But 70s and 80s weird that I really liked? I don't know. I don't know. Nothing's popping up. George says, Kazara Volume 2 is the best run in my opinion. Yeah, weird stuff. Let's see. Ryan says, RJ, I believe that a lot of writers undercover Satanists who cannot write true heroes because they do not believe in the Christian view of virtue, which is the basis of morality for Western heroes. Yeah, I would say you can stick Alan Moore into that. I think that perhaps he was trying to troll people back in the 70s when he started at it, but after you take that on that persona for 30, 40, 50 years, is it really a mask anymore? I don't know. Scrolling down. Oy. Oh, Sound Engraver's here. How you doing, Sound Engraver? Nice to see you here. Logic says, RJ, how about Impossible? Oh, John already actually talked about this one. He got some of these questions before me. Sound Engraver says, just finished George Perez Wonder Woman story from the 80s. Good work. Yeah, that is the iconic, for me anyways, that is the best version of Wonder Woman you're ever going to find. It's George Perez's Wonder Woman. And he does the romance well in those books as well. Let's see. George says, oops, something's going on here with my computer. There we go. George says, George Perez was the only artist that could do the 80s perm hairstyle good. I never thought of it that way, but yeah. Let's see. Logic says, my buddy loved Moon Knight when we were kids. He worked for Marvel Comics as a staff artist, really, but never got to work on Moon Knight. He did say McFarlane was a good dude. Okay. Baz says, RJ, did you ever read Warp? Warp is one of the books actually that, what is it? I don't have a full run of Warp. It's good stuff. It was weird. But one of the major reason why I contacted, the artist that I'm work with sometimes, which is Mike Gustovich. He actually contacted me, and Warp is one of the books that he worked on. And he also worked on the New Mutants, the first run of New Mutants, but he was only the inker on that. Let's see. Scrolling down. Yes, Logic, I'm scrolling down. Oh, look, I got to the end of the chat. Well, I've been talking for an hour and 25 minutes, which is usually a lot. Oh, Tony has another comment. Tony says, RJ, did you ever read Tim Truman's Grimjack? I ran across it when it came out, and I do believe I basically read it on the stand. I never actually bought it. If I did, I bought it later as like out of a dollar box. It's interesting stuff, but it wasn't. I know the basic plot and how it ebbs and flows with the character. It's weird. It is weird. It's not something I was ever into. Let's see. Let's see. All right. So I've got to the end of the chat. So I want to say thank you very much for everybody showing up who just wanted to talk. Let's see. Just wanted to hear me talk about some great 80s comics. And unfortunately, I'm covering over the assets of Dream Girl there. But thank you very much for everybody for showing up. We had a great chat here tonight. 31 people still in the chat. Wow. And this was great. And I'm glad John got to be part of it as well. So I'm going to leave you with the Crom the Destroyer trailer, because we started off with Fade to Blue, my new trailer for Fade to Blue, but we'll leave it you with Crom the Destroyer. And thank you very much once again for everybody for showing up. And for everybody who is watching this afterwards, there are 2 links in the description for my 3 graphic novels, which you can purchase, and the sign-up page for Fade to Blue, the new books, which will be coming out very soon. I was going to do it next month, but I think we're going to wait a little bit longer than that. We'll try to get into the spring, summer before we do that, because that's when sales really take a jump. So look forward to that, and I look forward to everybody signing up for Fade to Blue. Again, it is my, it's set in the same world as Thomas Valiant, but it is set in the 1930s, 1929 and early 1930s. And it's basically film noir meets Indiana Jones. So if that sounds appealing to you at all, go on over and sign up. You can get to see a little bit of the art there as well. And the trailer is there on that sign up page as well, if you want to watch it over again. I always love doing the trailers, although I don't think the amount of energy I put into them gets me as many sales as I think I will. But at the same time, I love doing them. Anyways, I will leave you with Crom the Destroyer, and thank you all for coming. I will see you all again next week. Bye.
An age ago, the beating heart of our people was a king who knew only victory. He wanted nothing more than an honorable death on the battlefield. Yet, none could match him, and so he wandered the earth, becoming lost in time and tide. Then we too lost our honest purpose, while silk-clad men sat upon the throne. But tremble now, all cities that lay under the stars, for out of the shadows and mists of the land of promise, our courage has been rekindled, our heart has returned, and the world will burn.